All right, welcome back to This Week in Triathlon. It is the week of April 3rd. Andreas, how are your legs feeling?
They're feeling pretty good, man. They weren't feeling so good on Saturday and Sunday. That's for sure.
All right, well, we're looking forward to getting your first person view from Oceanside 70.3. That's where we're going to jump into first this week. Obviously, the biggest race of last weekend. Um, One of the biggest fields I've ever seen outside of the World Championships. Jan Frodeno comes away with a win. But I think the most surprisingly dominant performance of the day was Heather Wurtel on the women's side. I got to give mad props to Heather Wurtel.
Yeah, and she had won a little bit earlier at Monterey 70.3. We know she's been pretty strong. Her run's gotten considerably better. I think more than a few people were talking about Saturday being the battle of the Heathers, Heather Jackson, who's the defending champion, and Heather Wurtel, and it proved to be so.
Yeah, I thought with Julie Dibbins coming back, I know she's a little bit older. She's coming back from the foot injury she sustained a couple of years ago at Kona. Has had some surgeries on her knee and on her foot. She's arguably the best swim biker the sport of triathlon has ever seen, at least at the Ironman 70.3 distance. I was really kind of curious to see how Dibbins would do. She did lead off the bike. But her run has always been a liability, and 2 years off doesn't seem to have helped that. And Heather Wurtel is a strong chick. She is tall. Compared to Heather Jackson, who's a pretty petite thing, Heather Jackson just towers over like a proud Canadian, and she absolutely dominated this race towards the end. I really thought Heather Jackson, who's always been strong at the front end of the season, has always kind of faded. I think this might actually not be necessarily a bad thing for Heather Jackson. Maybe we'll see her kind of build into the season rather than start with a bang and kind of fizzle out. So I'm kind of curious to see where Heather Jackson goes, but Heather Wurtel, glad to see her doing well.
Well, going back to Julie Dibbins, she's still making her way back from her injury, which sounds like it was pretty substantial injury over the last couple of years. So I wouldn't necessarily put too much emphasis on the lack of fitness on her run. I think she's working towards making it back to Kona. Was she happy with her performance? I think given the circumstances, it sounded like she was. But going back to Heather Jackson and Heather Wurtel, you're right. Heather Jackson has been super dominant at the beginning of the year over the last couple of years, and I think she's stepping up to the Ironman distance this year. So I'm not sure if that plays anything into this performance, but I seem to have heard that she was actually shooting for Kona this year. So I don't know. We'll see.
And then over on the men's side, the men's side was quite a bit deeper. And one of the points I think I made to you last week was that I felt that with Ironman Cabo going on the same weekend, I felt like any one of say 25 guys could have gone from Oceanside to Cabo and had a legitimate chance of winning that race down in Cabo San Lucas. But on the flip side, I don't think there's anyone from the Ironman Cabo field that could have gone to the Oceanside 70.3 and had a chance of winning that race. So that was pretty interesting, just how deep. I think the Cabo field wasn't necessarily shallow. I just think that the Oceanside field was just so deep with everyone wanting to test their fitness. If you weren't, within, obviously there was a gap in the first swim group. Andy Potts led out of the water, followed very closely by Jan Frodeno and James Sear. And I think Matt Chabot was able to join with them after putting in some hard early miles on the bike. But there was that small little gap they were able to hold off. And Potts has been able to hold off guys on that course for the last couple of years. Whatever he's done to be able to figure out that course, he's really nailed it. And I think Jan Frodeno and Matt Chabot really were able to capitalize on Potts' experience and pacing around that bike course. They rode pretty well. And the likes of Kienle, they weren't really able to catch up with them before they got off the bike.
Yeah, and speaking of Andy Potts, I took a look at the field and I thought to myself, there's absolutely no way he repeats. I mean, there's some strong guys, but as I wrote on the Take 5 that I did for this week on thisweekintry.com. You know, the guy is just, I've underrated the guy for a long time. I mean, the guy is, he's a stud, and we just, he's kind of quiet, he's soft spoken, he's not one of these big personalities, so I think that makes him fly under the radar a little bit. Also, his performances in Kona haven't been great. But the guy, I mean, he's kind of like Jan Frodeno. The guy can swim. The guy can bike good enough, and he can run pretty good as well.
Yeah, his bike has always been a little bit of a liability, especially at the Ironman distance. And he rode pretty darn well. Rode a 212 and change, or low 213s. But that was good enough to hold off the likes of Starkowitz, who's a great swimmer, great cyclist, and Kienle. And then we were just mentioning before the show that Hector Guerra, who is kind of I thought maybe it was an aberration in the results after Vegas 70.3, where he had the fastest bike split, yes, outsplitting Sebastian Kienle. And he came out of the water in 29 minutes and change, and was actually able to bridge up to those guys in front of him. Rode a 2:06 bike split, had the fastest bike split by almost 4 minutes. It didn't take too much for me to infer that this guy must have had some pro cycling background. He has. Used to ride with some guys that are now infamous for cycling doping. Isidro Nozal, most notably, who won the Vuelta a España back in the mid-2000s. So Hector Guerra, sorry, buddy, your name's tainted. You got busted for doping. It's a fact. So you can just go home. But anyways, I really hate seeing guys like that get a lot of notoriety or publicity on Twitter and things like that. But anyways, once they got to the run, Jan Frodeno dispatched the two guys he was with. Had a pretty fast bike split or run split, and he's a big guy. Frodeno, he's very thin. But he's something like 6'4". So him hauling up and down the course there at Oceanside, it's pretty impressive. Him and Potts are two big guys, but for them to run that well just shows how fit they really are.
And to talk a little bit about the course, it's pretty flat. There's a couple of little rises that take you from underneath the pier to kind of like the road that goes along the water a little bit, and it gets a little bit windy, but I mean, obviously a fast course. I think Potts has ran a 110 there before. Allegedly, the course was a little bit short, which is why they've changed it. I think the turnarounds were pushed out a little bit further, but it's a fast course. I think had he needed to run faster to win, he probably would have been able to. I don't think 111 is the fastest he had in the tank. But that's all really he needed.
Right on. And then, was there anything else that really stood out to you aside from just the quality of racing and the quality of the fields there over the weekend? Anything you saw?
That's a good question. I mean, the weather was fantastic. It felt windier to me than people were telling me it was, which probably speaks to my lack of fitness. The course, I would say it's very similar in elevation. The closest thing that I can compare it to is Vineman, possibly, but I feel that the hills come to you at once instead of spread over the course of the bike. But I would have expected it to be a little bit more picturesque, especially going north along the ocean, and really it wasn't. I understand you're not out there to look around and take in the scenery, but it is California. It would have been nice to just kind of bike right next to the ocean, but I think the old Highway 1 is, for lack of a better term, it just looks like an old, wider bike path. There's just not too much going on there. Actually, once the course went into Camp Pendleton and made a right turn at around San Clemente, I think it was, it actually got, the hills were nice and green, some California rolling hills. So it was pretty nice. But yeah, no, it was a great race, nice support, lots of people out on the run. Yeah, so definitely, I mean, for anybody who wants to do a good race, I'd recommend it for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It is a great course, and like a lot of races early in the spring, a lot of companies are interested in kind of debuting some of their new products. What can you tell me about what you saw with the new Quintana Roo?
Yeah, so we were invited to the Quintana Roo unveiling, which was pretty cool. They showed a bike, well, not intentionally. If you can remember, actually, you wrote something about it and posted it on the website when we were in Hawaii. But they showed a prototype bike in Hawaii, and this is kind of what became of it. And really cool bike. I'm going to write something more detailed that I'm going to post on the website over the next day or so. But essentially, they wanted to make a bike that was functionally fast. So, the problem they see with a lot of these super bikes nowadays is they essentially require you to travel with like your own Pro Tour mechanic because they're really tough to work on. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a super bike that needs proprietary parts. I read about somebody's P5 not being built properly in Los Cabos. So their hydraulics hose got chopped off and they were pretty much screwed for the race. I mean, they had no hydraulic hose because of how their shop built up the bike. So anyway, to backtrack a little bit, they really focused on making this bike as fast as they could, but also making it as friendly as possible to the person that's going to be riding it, because they understand that triathletes like to travel, whether it's to Kona, whether it's to Oceanside, and you live somewhere in the Midwest. I mean, traveling is a big part of triathlon, and you shouldn't really have to rely on somebody else to work on your bike. But very impressed. Geometry-wise, it changed a little bit, but changed a little bit from their previous bike, which was the CDO1 and the Elicito. But without getting into too much more detail, I'll write about it for the website.
Yeah, and just looking at some of the results I posted, like you said, it might not be the very fastest bike in the world, but it beat in terms of its performance in the winter. It looks like it beat the Orbea, the Oregon, the Specialized, and maybe the only ones that kind of came close to that didn't beat were the Trek and the Cervelo, where it was so close, where a few seconds here or there. I know it sounds like a big deal for some athletes that they want to pay money for those extra couple seconds. But when you think about spending those the last days before a big race, you don't want to be stressing around looking for parts or building up your bike or worrying about that kind of stuff. You don't want to be worrying about those 2 seconds go right out the window when your brakes are rubbing. You can't figure out how to adjust it because you have some kind of proprietary bike that's hard to access. So. I've always been interested in what QR does. I think Brad Devaney really knows his stuff. He's the designer there. Their marketing and their releases always seem to be, a little bit anemic, in my opinion. We were at the unveiling of the Boardman, their new Boardman bike, which I don't think can even hold a candle to this new PR6. But the way they built it up, and they had the party, and they had world champion cyclists there, and had several dozen photographers taking pictures. And then over at the QR tent, they just kind of had this new bike kind of sitting, behind some of their stands, just kind of hiding out. And then to see it kind of released in this fashion, like 6 months later, it's kind of interesting. But they do make good bikes, and I don't want that to diminish them, but compared to bikes like Sipo or something like that, where like they don't even look aerodynamic or even functional. But you look at a bike like this. It's clearly functional. It looks like an improved P4 in my opinion. And I think whoever buys this bike isn't going to be impeded at all, and it's probably going to give you a great value. And can maybe even take their wife out for a nice couple of dates, save with the money they saved.
Well, I don't know about that because it's still. I mean, you're talking about an $8,500 bike, spec'd pretty nicely, but nonetheless, I mean that's not chump change. It is. Superbike price. I mean, there's no getting around it. I mean, you're not spending $12,000, so I guess in that sense that you do have some money to take out your wife or husband for a nice dinner. But I think what I took away from it is they're trying to get back in the game. They haven't been in the game. That's just the reality of it. They know they haven't been in the game. And like you said, they make some nice bikes. but their geometry, their previous geometry, limited them, and who really could take advantage of them. And a lot of their bikes just looked odd in the sense that, for people to ride them, they had to stack them up really high. They've come out with a really, really cool stem system that allows individual movement fore and aft and up and down. So, which I think is going to be fantastic for dialing in the bike, whether you're doing it or a fitter's doing it. So I think that they're on the right track. This is a great bike. They're going to come out with some different price points as the year goes on, probably later on in the fall. But they're trying, and they put together a really cool product. And I'm excited to see how they do.
Me as well. So good luck to them with that new bike. And then just the other event of the weekend that I was really interested in watching was Ironman Los Cabos. Before my shoulders started to flare up, I actually had this list of this race on my radar of potential events. Cabo San Lucas is a beautiful area. It reminds me of like a Scottsdale, Arizona, except on the ocean. You have the Pacific side and the Sea of Cortez side. So beautiful ocean there, nice warm climate. And I was interested to see how a couple of my friends were going to do. Matt Russell, most notably, has been working with Jerry Rodriguez, really trying to turn around his swim this year. Matt Russell has always been a good bike runner, always been a very, very subpar swimmer. And after working with Jerry Rodriguez down there in Southern California in LA for the last several months, Matt swam a 51-minute Ironman in the ocean. So, and actually, from what I hear, actually pulled several other athletes around the course with him. So, hey, good work, Matt. Glad to see the swim's coming together. And sorry about the flat tire you had there. And had it not been for that flat, maybe you would have been vying there for near the pointy end of that field and maybe even a podium. So too bad about that. But Daniel Fontana of Italy won that race. Lindsay Corbin, no surprise, winning the women's race. I expected Lindsay to be leading a little bit more than she was. Didn't really kind of own it until the end of that race. But good to see them coming through. And what do we got coming up this weekend, Andreas?
Yeah, so the start of the ITU WTS World Triathlon Series Auckland is this weekend. So draft legal, Olympic style racing coming back, and I'm pretty excited. Most importantly, or most notably, because even though it's in New Zealand, a bunch of time zones away, it actually lines up quite well for people in America, whether you're out on the East Coast or the West Coast, to be able to watch on Friday or Saturday and Sunday. Saturday at 8:30 p.m. the women race, 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, and 5:30 p.m. on Sunday Pacific time is when the men's go off. But I love the battles. It's the first one, but luckily there's only a couple more than a handful of them. So typically you see a lot of these guys and ladies show up for most of them, if not all of them. So lots of good battles. Javier Gomez, obviously, Jonathan Brownlee, Mola, who you mentioned before we got on the air, has been running fantastic. I've actually got him finishing in the podium. And then on the women, Gwen Jorgensen, I think you've kind of got to pick her. She didn't win last year the really hilly race that they did in Austria, and also she didn't win the finale, but I believe she crashed out or she had some sort of incident. So, but yeah, I'm super stoked about it.
Yeah, still early in the season, but we know guys like Mario Mola are on form. Mario he did a sprint distance with a 5K at the end of it recently, and outsplit everyone considerably. Ran a 13-minute 55 5K split on the roads. Very impressive, outsplitting guys like Brendan Sexton, who we know he can run, and Richard Murray, Sven Riederer. Outsplit Riederer by something like 50 seconds over the course of the 5K. So absolutely murdering the run, coming from that running background. I'm going to love to see Javier Gomez getting the run for the money, and Jonathan Brownlee as well. It's been getting boring the last couple of years. It's kind of been like Groundhog's Day with Gomez and the Brownlees, just kind of every race kind of going back and forth. So it's nice to see some new blood moving up, getting really fast. It's going to be vying for some competitive finishes there. And interested to see how Brennan Sexton does coming back after a little bit of a year, not quite off, but off away from the WTS races. So looking to see how he comes back as his form builds back, and it's going to be a great race. I'm looking forward to tuning in, especially Gwen Jorgensen. I can't pass up watching Gwen represent the U.S., and she's not too tough to watch. So
I like to watch when she runs, because I'm convinced that one of these days there's just going to be a wind gust and it's just going to blow her away. I mean, she turns to the side and you pretty much miss her. She's so skinny. Yeah. But there's another American who actually won the I think it was a sprint distance in New Zealand. I think it might have been the one where Mario Mola blazed the course, but her name is Katie Hersey, and she took the win. She reminds me a little bit more of like a Emma Moffitt, where she's a little bit bulkier. She's kind of like a Javier Gomez type. She looks powerful, but she could definitely. I mean, she had a fantastic time. She beat a couple of regulars that you see out on the podium in the series. So I don't know. Keep an eye on her if you're rooting for the Americans.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. So and then we've obviously got the 70.3 in Texas coming up. I believe that's in a couple weeks.
Yeah. This weekend we got Galveston coming up this weekend. Looking for Richie Cunningham to start his season strong there, and Kelly Williamson. That's her home state, so curious to see how she does. We got Brazil coming up in a couple weeks. We got Florida 70.3 coming up, and the season is afoot, so looking forward to seeing some big results for some talented athletes coming up soon.
And speaking of Kelly Williamson, I actually had a chance to talk to her while in Oceanside, so look for that. I got to talk to actual Starkey as well, which was a lot of fun. This guy, man, you go on Slow Twitch and he can't get it right with people. They interviewed him after the race and they put it up on Competitor, and they started. He'll say whatever's on his mind, and he doesn't necessarily say it in a negative way. But it's post race. He says something, and of course he gets picked apart. But the guy is actually quite a nice guy, and I'll try to get the video up sooner rather than later as well.
Yeah, no, Starkwood's he's a good guy. I don't know if that comes across with everybody, but I think he is a good, wholesome guy, and I'm just going to chalk it up to being an engineer. I don't know too many engineers that can really penetrate with their communication. So, but he sure as hell can race, and he's a good guy. So, love the Starkey. And anything else for this week, Andreas?
I think you need to start clarifying if you're talking about actual or the real Starkey.
Well, I'm not talking about myself, so I'm talking about real human being Starkey.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. Excited to see the next few weeks in terms of the races and the results. We'll keep up with things on our Facebook page, facebook.com/thisweekintriathlon, and of course our website, thisweekintri.com.
Great, Andres. All right, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.